Shall I get going?
Yes, you're all set, Henry.
All set. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Johanna, for those announcements. It's great to hear about the Saturday class happening. Thank you very much, Valerie Roshi, for offering that. That's fantastic. And you know what I thought I would do tonight actually is start looking at some koans from the Gateless Gate. The Gateless Gate is one of the classic collections of koans compiled in 1228 in China by a monk called Wu Men. And I wanted to just kind of see how we might, in a way, I want I want to look at the first one, by the way, in that collection is Mu, but I don't want to look at that one right now. I want to look at the second one and see how we might interpret it in the light of some current thinking about the nature of reality. Actually, you know, that some scientists in different fields are looking very deeply into the role of consciousness in reality as we think we know it, and what relationship there might be between reality as we seem to know it and any possible putative, actual, objective reality. And it's a really interesting question, I think, from sort of the Zen point of view, because Zen's been concerned with that since way back, you know, since the earliest times of Buddhism. I mean, when in Zen's understanding, when Buddha, supposedly the first person to awaken to the nature of things, you know, presumably that's rather legendary, presumably, but anyway, in the tradition, Buddha saw that many things weren't the way he had thought they were, kind of thing. Possibly, in fact, all things weren't the way he'd thought. And some contemporary scholars and even scientists are sort of consider Buddhism to be a theory of everything. You know, I mean, whether or not it's a good theory is another matter, but it is presenting itself as a theory of everything, primarily through, you know, the central experience of awakening, which after all gives its name to the whole thing, because Buddha, the word, means awakened. And to awaken, well, we've got to look at what that means. Now, with this 12th and 13th century Master Mumon, or Wu Men in Chinese, let's take a look at him to see how that refracts in his life and his teaching. He was very, you know, serious practitioner, of course, and he was given the koan that we still commonly use as a first koan, namely Mu. You know, does a dog have Buddha nature? You know, does a dog participate in whatever this awakened reality is? In other words, whatever happened to the semi-legendary, semi-historical figure of Buddha, I mean, definitely historical, but legendary in some senses. But, you know, who knows how much was sort of added to his biography that, in fact, came from many practitioners, for example. But whatever happened to his sense of reality that changed all his priorities and led him to feel impelled to sort of try to share what he'd discovered, because it seemed so important, because it seemed like basically he'd got a step closer to reality than he had previously been. And presumably we're analogs. We have been living in the world of things as we know it and trying to handle it, and because of feeling ourselves to be one thing among many things, struggling to sort of organize our lives in ways we want that feels good, and it's challenging, and we have all these difficult emotions that come up, and we're driven by perceived needs and cravings, and but in the light of the discovery of the way things really are that Buddha went through, all of that fell away, was no longer necessary, and it felt like what he had found was more real than the prior version of things. And so it's a big mouthful, but I hope you're getting a sense of what I'm talking about. So Mumon, whatever, 1,500 years later, he's practicing very earnestly, and he's got this koan: does a dog have Buddha nature? In other words, whatever it was that Buddha awakened to, does that also pertain to a dog? I mean, not exactly saying, can a dog awaken? It's not exactly saying that. It's saying, whatever the nature of that new version of experience, is even a dog part of that? And since, we know that Buddhism is a theory of everything, if we can call it that, of course it would apply to the dog as much as a pepper pot, as much as a tree, a lamppost, a car, a gas pump, a skyscraper, ocean, mountain, river. All that we experience is a shift in the nature of experiencing. We could almost put it like that. Such that in the new way, the sense of self as separate has gone, and we find at least a kind of seamless whole is actually what this whole appearance of things is sort of more really about. A seamless whole that doesn't preclude all and each thing arising, just as it does, phenomena. And this applies certainly not just 2,400 years ago, certainly not 800 years ago with Mumon. It applies right now. So right now, for all of us, each of us, there's a seamless whole. And that's more real. Let me just put it like that. But it allows all these multifarious things to be arising, whether it's a dog or a monk or Joshu, the master in the koan. Now, Joshu's response to that question is mu. So that's where we get our koan mu from. And mu is literally, it means not, but sort of really it's Joshu's, in that moment, it's simply his way of sharing the seamless whole. So he says mu, and actually that little syllable mu is the entirety of that seamless whole. Because the seamless whole functions like that. It's weird. It doesn't obey our normal rules of the way things are. So one thing appears, and it can be the entirety. It can, so there's many koans like this where one famous master, he just held up a finger as his teaching. Whatever he was asked, held up a finger. He was showing the whole, the seamlessness. likewise, we had a whole retreat on Rosso or Luzu, who his teaching was he turned and faced the wall. He just sat facing the wall. That gesture, that action, when he's facing the wall, it's the same thing. The whole, it's not just a whole that's nearby, a sort of whole goes on forever, actually, is there, is here in his sitting. And because it's even, but because this is how koans work, this is how they work, this is what they share. And because it's one whole, actually, it doesn't have dimension. So it's, we might kind of think of it conceptually as if it sort of goes on and on and on and on. In some sense, that's true. But in another sense, it's not, because it's without dimension. Okay, let me just sort of pause there and come back to the story. The story is Mumon, Wumen, sitting with the koan Mu, diligently, apparently for something like 6 years or 6.5 years, which happens to be the length of time that Buddha is said to have been practicing hard before he awakened. But so, maybe there's some kind of little bit of, I don't know what, legendary parallel going on there or something. But anyway, he got very obsessed with it. He worked persistently on the koan for 6 years. It's said that when he felt sleepy or in low spirits, it can get you down, actually, when you're sitting with a koan. They're very tricky beasts. It's a different way of practice from mindfulness, where we would be, if negative emotions come up, we'd really address them and try to nurture them, nourish them, and let them release, or something like that. Certainly we want to be aware of them. In koan training, well, there are different ways of approaching it, but the traditional way is pretty dogged. You just keep coming back to this one little syllable mu, and likewise with other koans. That's so, even when sleepy, even in low spirits, he'd actually bump his head on a pillar to kind of wake himself up. Honestly, for somebody like me who's suffering from somewhat compromised neurology at the moment, I really don't recommend it. Don't bump your head on a pillar or anything if you can possibly help it. But anyway, he did. And apparently it actually did help him, because one day he was standing somewhere near the zendo and he heard the sound of the drum. That monasteries would have various instruments signaling different things, bells, drums, that wood block, and so on. And this drum was signaling lunchtime. And he heard that and he was suddenly enlightened, deeply enlightened. And I want to just come back to what that means in a moment. And he wrote a poem about what happened to him. And I'm going to share that with you. A peal of thunder in the bright blue sky. So imagine a clear, clear sky and a crack of thunder in the middle of the sky, Okay, so already that's a little bit odd, right? In a clear sky, you don't get thunder. He did. Clear blue sky, thunder. The multitude of living beings on earth, all living beings on earth, have opened their eyes, awakened. All things, all beings, all things have awakened. He's suddenly seen that whatever this awakening thing is, it applies to everything. That's what he's awakened to. All things in the world bow alike. There's everything is infinitely grateful, let's say. And Mount Sumeru, which is this kind of cosmic mountain said to be in the middle of the universe. Mount Sumeru jumps up and dances. So this is his expression of his awakening. And so sort of sudden sort of shockwave through everything. And as a result of which, all beings open their eyes. And all things in the world sort of so grateful to exist. I mean, imagine the sweetness of that, is sort of seeing that a flower and a paving stone and a rope for pulling a bell, just in its very existence, it seems to be expressing profound gratitude. It's a flavor, it's a reality. Actually, you can see this. Of course, there's a different way of seeing. We normally look at a paving stone without even thinking about it. But in awakening, all manner of things, or any single thing, can be just filled with an absolute wonder that it exists, and it seems to almost palpably recognize the wonder of its existing. So he's had this, and obviously it's a very amazing experience, and this great mountain jumps up and dances. So what's that? Well, let's leave that aside for now. So that was an expression of what happened to him through working with Mu. But note actually that this very important experience for him, life-changing actually, it didn't happen on the cushion while doing Mu. And this is quite often how these kinds of experiences are. We work diligently, or the best we can, with our koan on the cushion. And then we're just walking to the lunch hall, and a bell goes off, or a drum sounds in his case, and it precipitates that. It's not that's a familiar pattern, how these things happen. So we've been sitting very diligently, and then we're going to Trader Joe's, and we get out of the car, hit the fob to lock it, and it may just happen then, or it's like we're ripe and prepared by all the sitting we've done, all the samadhi we've cultivated, but the actual sort of thunderclap in his case can happen when we least expect it. It usually does, actually. Now, what about this? So he compiled this collection later, collection of koans. It's actually, I'm not really going to get into the second koan. I didn't expect to spend quite this long introducing Mumon and his collection, but he compiled this collection of koans. He put Mu first because it was the one that had helped him so much. And then he put another 47. So it's a total of 48 koans. And they're all actually sort of unique expressions of awakened nature, awakened reality, the reality we awaken to. Okay, so now I want to sort of pivot and just touch in on one contemporary cognitive scientist who's trying to reckon with reality. There's this great guy, Donald Hoffman. Some of you will know his work, I'm pretty sure. And a book that Rachel actually recently lent to me, very, very good book, called The Case Against Reality: Why Evolution Hid the Truth from Our Eyes. And let me just say, I'd actually read various articles by Donald Hoffman over the years and listened to some talks of these. You can find plenty of him online. He's at UC Irvine, and he's a cognitive scientist. And he worked quite closely with Francis Crick. Have I got the right name? Who was the geneticist who discovered DNA. And actually, they worked together on trying to find out. There was some survey that was done at some point in the 90s, I think, taking a kind of census from a lot of scientists of what were the most important unsolved matters in science. And something like, Crick, something like 125 questions were on the long list. And the second one was the biological basis for consciousness. How does, the one way that the question is framed sometimes is, how does matter, in this case brains, neurons, create the subjective experience of consciousness? How does matter do that? And it's still actually, I think, unresolved. Crick was working on it because having solved the DNA issue, the genetic thing, how on earth did replication, which is the core of essential element of the theory of evolution, how did it actually happen, and what was the mechanism? And he found the double helix and DNA, RNA. I think I've got that right. I think, forgive me if I'm slightly off, if any of you know better than that, but approximately. Anyway, so then Crick thought in his later years, well, I did that. Can't I also figure out this consciousness thing? So together, the two of them started working on that. And they thought, well, Crick thought that the key was neurons, that there must be something about neurons that they can create subjective conscious experience. And they disagreed on certain key things, actually. It's quite interesting. So, and this is going back into the mid-90s, early to mid-90s. By the way, they had a sort of club. There was a club of scientists that would meet once a month, and they'd give themselves, they'd have a nice lunch together. And then they would have all afternoon, and then they'd go to a restaurant in the evening, continue. And they were all pondering, considering this question: how does a lump of matter, the brain, create subjective experience? So, so Hoffman has some sort of pedigree. We're working with Crick, and I think he's a widely respected guy, but essentially in this book, The Case Against Reality, the book is one long argument, and I'm only halfway through, so I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you a bit, some key things in it. The first is that you'd think, and many scientists have thought, that our perceptions must reasonably well represent an objective reality out there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived. That natural selection would have selected for organisms that sort of accurately perceive their environment so that they can get what they need and avoid the threats in it. And Hoffman totally disagrees. He says all that's needed from natural selection is fitness. As long as we are able to navigate whatever reality is, such that we, get what we need and reproduce and, stay alive long enough to do that, evolution is satisfied. Natural selection is met. It's fitness, not truth. And he has this little acronym, the FBT theory, which means fitness beats truth. Okay, so, truth and fitness, you'd think might well coincide, but they do not need to. And every time, fitness will beat truth. In other words, if you've got a pool of organisms, some of them see somehow the truth of the objective reality, and some of them only see the objective reality in ways that produce fitness. In other words, that they can get what they need. By the way, I don't mean fitness in terms of working out, I mean fitness in the evolutionary sense, that they fit their environment, get their needs met. They will always win. So that's one concept. So the idea that this means, I mean, it's actually a big deal, and it really relates to awakening. It's saying that the way we experience this world with space and time and things in it is actually, there's no way of knowing that it is a representation of objective reality. We know that what we see and hear is our version of something going on out there, and that's all we know. And we do not know what is actually going on out there. And actually, he has this very nice little other acronym, ITP, interface. Man, what is it? It's the interface theory of perception. He means like the same way that your computer has a desktop and it has, icons on it for files and so on. You wouldn't look at a blue square icon of a file and think that that was the shape of the actual file. No, you click on it, opens up, and it's, who knows what, it's a JPEG or something totally different, or it's a Word document. And actually, if that icon was a representation of reality, it would have to show you the inner workings of the computer, which is, numbers and electrical impulses and silicon and God knows what. And you don't want to see that. It would make the computer extremely, extremely hard to use. So you actually want an interface that allows you to use the computer well. And it's this analogous with our version of reality, that we have been naturally selected for having an interface that produces evolutionary fitness, not an accurate, a true version of some reality out there. So this is, can you see where this is sort of going? Because it means that, man, however wonderful, however much beauty and our version of reality can create for us, and also however much pain and misery and dart upon dart of suffering it may generate. In awakening, that is precisely the thing that is kind of unveiled. Now, this would be an interesting point. I know that he sort of gets somewhere near this, I think, I haven't yet finished the book, but I think he does. But actually, when somebody has a strong awakening experience, like Mumon, presumably like Shakyamuni, the one word that commonly comes up about it, of course, is shunyata, emptiness, seeing as if through the veil being this three-dimensional world. Somehow that is seen through. And of course, it comes at the same time as our sense of knowing who we are. The veil, it's so cool, this, because it's actually, I mean, let me just read you a little section. He says, he's quoting somebody who described the theory of evolution, Darwin's theory, as being a universal acid that kind of strips away all our common assumptions and preconceptions. It says, when the universal acid of Darwin's dangerous idea, evolution, is poured onto our perceptions, it dissolves the objectivity of physical objects, which we assumed exist and interact even when no one looks. Then this acid dissolves the objectivity of space-time itself, the very framework within which Darwinian evolution has been assumed to take place. This requires us to devise a more fundamental framework without space, time, and physical objects for understanding reality. We will need to understand the dynamics of this new framework. Now, this is, it's a harrowingly close description to when we awaken to shunyata, emptiness. When we awaken to it without space, without time, without physical objects. So, I know he's coming to it as a non-practitioner, as a sort of deep thinker, but it's pretty remarkable to get this notion that our version of reality, three-dimensional, with the sun and the moon and the stars and the rivers and the great earth and the mountains and the cities and bridges and skyscrapers and airplanes and meditation practice and meditation halls and all of that is, in an older analogy than interface, is a veil. All of that is a veil. And it's possible somehow to have the veil vanish. Yeah, it's possible. And one of the wonders of that is we then see that it doesn't vanish without our self vanishing. They happen together. And here's a really interesting thing. In Buddhism, there's an old idea that Buddha's trying to explain somewhere the relationship between our consciousness and the world, the objective world. And he says it's like two sheaves of rushes that are leaning against each other. So a sheaf, is like when somebody's bound the stalks of whatever it is together, not something we commonly see anymore, but would have been a very common sight in an agrarian society up until probably even 50 years ago. I remember seeing them in England way back, in my childhood. Sort of bound stalks of wheat, in the case of the sutra, it's talking about rushes. Two of these sheaves leaning against each other. When one falls, the other falls. One is our consciousness, the other is world. They both fall. That's one simile, metaphor for awakening. But when you start to sort of think about this, that it's so hard not to think of our experience of the world as the world. But our experience of the world is a simulation. It's a model. In his language, it's an interface. Now the one sort of hard thing a little bit here is that Zen has a lot of emphasis on the beauty of the world, and that somehow knowing its emptiness makes it even more beautiful, that things appear the way they do. And so we actually don't really want to be kind of denigrating the world, if you see what I mean. That this, I don't know how Hoffman goes with this, but for us practitioners, this doesn't mean that there's something kind of faulty exactly about our experience, and we should forget about it, that we should become well, I don't know, mindless, experienceless zombies. It doesn't mean that at all. It's a matter of seeing through all of this, and how precious it then becomes that these appearances are arising is a wonderful thing. It just breaks attachment, doesn't disengage us. It breaks attachment, which allows us to pivot in our orientation in life. So this experience actually has what we might call a moral dimension. It engages our hearts. It ignites love. It's incredible that it does that, and the way it does it. And so let me just add that in there. And again, I haven't finished the book. Maybe he gets there anyway. So, okay, that's what I wanted to really touch on tonight. And next week, I'm thinking that I'm right in saying that Valor is actually offering a retreat in Germany next week without going to Germany. And therefore, it'll be me again next Thursday. And I'm going to continue on this little theme of entering the Mumonkan, the Gateless Gate. And we'll talk a little bit about why it's called the Gateless Gate. And then we'll get to the second koan in the Gateless Gate next week, which also ties in with this kind of in an interesting way. So, okay, how are we doing for time? Hold on just a sec, please. I'm uncovering my screen. I'm assuming, hey, I've got a message up, unmute myself. You've been hearing me, have you? Oh, yeah, phew. It's not like I gave the whole talk. Muted. Okay, so let me, I don't know, I'm going to pause there, but I'll tell you what, if anybody wants to ask a question, I'm open to that for sure. And you could just raise your hand. You go to reactions and you do raise hand. And then I think as I'm a co-host, I can probably unmute you, but we might just do a one or just like, I don't know, 5 minutes more or something. If anybody's got a question, please feel free to. And if you all want to go and have supper, that's fine too. Or breakfast. Okay. I'm just going to look. There's one in the check. What do you see when you see reality? You're looking at it right now. Okay? Because emptiness, shunyata, yes, emptiness, but emptiness is form. Form is emptiness. There is not the slightest gap. It's not two things. Reality is what you're seeing now. However, you can see other dimensions of it. It's like the light can change. You get a different angle of light, and oh my God, you see something remarkably different. Okay, I can see Isaac's got a. Isaac, I'm going to unmute you. Hold on. Am I going to unmute you?
I think you did.
Okay, great. Cool.
So, this doesn't mean no, but it does mean no?
It literally means not. It's not the normal word. It's not the normal word for no in Japanese.
He's not quite saying no.
No, he's not quite saying no. He's just sort of breathing out not. I mean, there's another koan where he gives the opposite answer. Same question, and he says "u," which means yes. So and in both cases, he's actually giving us the whole world, So this is why I think in the last retreat on Mu, I was saying, don't take it too literally. There's the Mu that we focus on, and we really take it as an object of concentration. We focus on the Mu, just the sound Mu in our minds, Mu. It's just that, but actually, it's very much more than that. But we have to come to not think our way to that. We have to come to discover that for ourselves, what this other great Mu really is. It has to show itself to us. You can't get there through thinking. Okay, is that enough, Isaac?
For now, yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay, I see somebody saying they're a geneticist. Okay, cool. I've got it all right. Okay, good. The crick stuff, great. Have you ever heard of manic episodes being a catalyst, almost awakening? I mean, I could believe that. I haven't heard of it personally, but it makes sense. It sort of makes sense to me. I mean, yeah, I mean, man, if these experiences are powerful and strange, and if you're not in a context that's supportive, they can be very destabilizing. They can be. They can also be immensely beautiful and resolve life in remarkable ways, even without a supportive context. Actually, I've heard of that and known of that. But I don't know enough about mania to really. Let me just see the other one. Isn't it the other way around? Awakening can lead to. Yeah, that's sort of what I'm saying, I guess, just now. It's possible, I think. I don't think it's at all common, actually, especially not if someone's practicing in a supportive context. It's safe. I mean, the thing is, it's already true. It's just that we're very attached to our user interface. Okay, I think we'll call it a night there, and we'll let everybody go. Have a lovely evening. Huge thanks to Peg for leading us, and Johanna for sharing those announcements, and hope everybody can sort of actually like I'll be carrying on this subject next week. So if anybody can make it, great. And then that retreat, actually, it's called Zen Basics, but actually I'm going to cover a lot of basics, including sitting with koans. Okay. Have a great evening, everybody. Thank you.